Welcome to Behind the Upload. Each week I speak with an entrepreneur or creator about their video marketing experiences. We'll then extract the tools, tactics, and insight you can apply to your own brand. I'm Joey Dowd, your host. In this episode, I chat with Layla Pomper from ProcessDriven. ProcessDriven helps businesses capture their process by mastering ClickUp. Now, we break down what that all means in the interview and how YouTube played a vital role in shaping what her company looks like today. But just as a little bit of a primer, ClickUp is a project management platform. It's in the same category as Asana, Trello, Monday. And Layla's company helps other businesses adapt that software to make their business run more smoothly. So in this episode, we'll break down how Layla turned YouTube into her biggest source of leads for her company, how she simplifies her video production process to consistently put out content, and why creating a YouTube channel was one of the best decisions she ever made in her life. For all the show notes, links, and transcript, head over to behindtheupload.com. And now, enjoy my chat with Layla. Well, thanks so much for joining me, Layla. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited, like I said, to talk about the cool part of business, YouTube.
Yeah, the deconstructing the YouTube part. So first, let's kind of set the stage and let's talk about just kind of quick summary of what you're doing now with ProcessDriven and what you did before the current version of ProcessDriven. Just kind of set, because I know the YouTube sort of evolved over this change. And so to kind of like set the end point we're at now and the starting point now, before we dig into YouTube. So like let's anchor those two with what you're doing now. And
okay, I'm gonna try.
Okay,
you can circle me back down if I'm getting too lost here. So currently the business, right, which is the kind of the heart of everything, is ProcessDriven, and we are currently at this point in time a membership-based business. We help people systemize their business using a tool called ClickUp. That's the today. But as you alluded to, that's not where we started. And YouTube really helped us evolve into where we are now, where it's primarily this content and education membership model. So where we started was actually pre-YouTube in a one-on-one consulting service provider model. So still in services, but a very different format now.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So your original thing was you would do one-on-one consulting. You'd have a direct client. They would book you. You'd help them optimize their business
processes
operations.
And systems. Yep.
And then today it is a kind of hybrid course and community where now instead of you having one-to-one time, you're one-to-many.
One-to-group.
Yeah.
One-to-group time.
So those are kind of our two bookends. So let's break down the YouTube process. So you have a really good YouTube video that kind of highlighted your whole year in YouTube. And at this point, it's probably been like 18 months. So you started like going into YouTube in March 2020, which coincided with a global pandemic.
It was perfect. Good time to work on YouTube.
So let's start there. Why did you first get into YouTube? And, what was the initial reasoning for starting to post videos?
Well, if you watch that video on YouTube, you've heard me talk about this, which might not be great for a YouTube strategy podcast here, but I will just be honest and say when we started, there was no strategy. There really was no we. It was myself. And I was in a position where, the global pandemic gave me a little bit of extra free time. And one of the things that I thought would be useful is instead of recording a bunch of Loom videos, which is what I was doing up to that point for my individual clients, what if I just recorded one video and shared it with 3 clients? It was such an unremarkable idea. And that's kind of where the whole YouTube videos started, the YouTube channel started. I would record a tutorial for a client, and rather than just sending it to that person with their specific stuff, I would take the extra time to make it generic so it didn't have any sensitive information and then upload it. I honestly thought that was all it was going to be at the time, just a database of videos so I could save time having to make individual tutorials for clients. Obviously, that's not how it ended up, delightfully. So that it then evolved once I realized that other people beyond my clients were interested in these, simple little tips and trick tutorials I was posting on YouTube about all sorts of software.
Because it sounds like you're kind of just using YouTube as like a free video hosting platform.
Absolutely.
Were you doing anything else, like having descriptive titles? Like, was there a reason that people were finding these videos that weren't your clients?
Yeah. So, I wish I could say, yes, there was a great strategy behind it. Honestly, it was a how-to based title based on exactly what I was showing. Most of the videos were less than 10 minutes, 5-6 minutes were probably normal at that point. And I think I might have been writing some descriptions at that point, maybe like 1 or 2 sentences, not optimized in any way, just so that way when my clients saw the video, they would understand what was going on. And that was it. I was just kind of using it, like you said, for glorified video hosting. And when I started seeing the views go beyond 2, 3, 4 views, 2, 3, 400, then I realized, this is something I should probably pay attention to. Imagine that.
Well, I mean, I guess it lucked out that you didn't just leave the default like MOV1345, like .mp4, and you like, at least had a descriptive title. So
yeah, I went beyond the bare minimum.
And the thing I love about this too was you were using the equipment that you had. You were making, these are literally Loom recordings. These are just like raw Loom, like a screen share
Terrible
with your
quality.
little face in a bubble. Right. What cam did you, was it like your computer's camera or something? What was it? Like just the built-in camera?
Just a Logitech camera. Yep.
No microphone?
And no microphone at the beginning, and then quickly got into a Blue Yeti because we had one lying around, and that was it. Like window light, webcam, Blue Yeti. That was the first, I think, even once we got serious, I think that was like maybe the first 60, if I were to guess, 60 videos on the channel, which got us up to, a few thousand subscribers by that point with just that setup.
Just Loom, just recording your screen, talking about useful stuff.
Pretty much,
I love that. Yeah, you didn't invest in anything, and it just was like whatever you had around, and you just got started. You did mention that you like had batched 30 videos at one time. What was the release schedule when you ended up posting those?
Yeah, so after I got past the glorified YouTube as a hosting platform part, and I was realizing that things were taking off, I realized, let me just record a bunch of stuff. And like you said, then I decided to record a whole bunch of videos, whether they were 5-minute Loom videos, or maybe at that point I started to dabble in OBS to record with a slightly higher quality. But for those, I batched about 30 of them before I really considered the YouTube channel started. And I had them all ready to go. And I was scheduling them, I want to say early on, about 2 per week was where I started. And within that very first kind of few weeks of realizing, I'm going to do YouTube as more than just hosting, I had booked out about 3 months of content and just filled up the whole channel. I had no idea what was going to perform, what wasn't, but I knew by that point that people were finding it. And I was already getting conversations started with people across the internet who found the videos and wanted our services. So I decided to just go for it, and I knew not to expect any results. 30 videos or so spread out over the first 3 months or so of the channel, about twice a week. But when I look back at the history, it was probably more sporadic at times because I would just be like, I'll just publish this. I wasn't really sticking to anything firm then.
Did you see, I have somewhere I'm going with this question because I noticed that comment. I thought it was interesting because in a previous interview with Jelani, who runs Cartfuel, he was like advocating like when you're starting YouTube, you should just crank out as many videos as possible because it gives the algorithm a chance to kind of figure out like what you're about. And even YouTube like recently confirmed that with like an interview with their engineer where they're like, it's not that we don't promote new channels, it's just new channels don't have as much content. So like the algorithm just doesn't have as much data to like be like, oh, hey, this is who we should recommend the video to. So when you mentioned that 30 video kind of like initial push, did you see like hockey stick kind of like growth from that? I was wondering if like that helped boost your channel or if that was like kind of like a good catalyst to like get the flywheel going.
I mean, honestly, I will say like when I look at the analytics, I do not see hockey stick. I see gradual, like almost a straight line, 1-for-1 correlation over time. I will say I didn't publish 30 at once. I did drip them. So that probably correlates to this versus that kind of thing. Whoops, sorry. If I were to do it again, I probably would do it the same way. I'll say that. The reason I did 30 is because I didn't want to be one of those many YouTube channels. It's like, I'm starting a channel. 3 videos, 2 months off, 1 video, 2 months off. I had free time because I lost 1 or 2 like major engagements due to the pandemic. And I was like, I'm going to use this free time as if it was a client. And my engagement with this client is to make as many videos as I humanly can. And I think if I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't have put in enough to see any results because it really did take 30, 40 videos until I started seeing, oh, wow, this is really, in that period of time, this is really marketing my business. This is really getting me in front of people. And if I would have done 10, I don't know if I would have been motivated enough by the result that I would have gotten after 10, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're saying if you were producing them in real time and like after 10 and then you're like, I got to film another video, and that motivation wouldn't be there.
Yeah, it's tough when you're starting out, man. It's tough to keep yourself going, especially when you're doing it all yourself. I definitely needed that, front loading to make sure that I could just sit back a bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's sort of one of those things where you like your future self then like thanks your past self. You're like, thank you for
that.
making these videos. Yeah, in your video, I guess you were sort of describing it as like stage 1, stage 2. So stage 2 was stuff was picking up steam, and you're at a crossroads where you're like your clients that had left from the pandemic, or you're picking up clients again. So your workload was like back at 100%. But now you also had the YouTube videos going, and you said you had to decide if you like kept normal hours or just doubled down and made videos on nights and weekends, and you made videos on nights and weekends. And then you said it was one of the best decisions you ever made in your life. So let's dive into that.
Don't tell my husband that, but yeah.
You said you hedged it. So
100%. I mean, I think like talk about thanking your past self. I am so glad I front loaded, because when those clients came back on, it was like I had a cushion. I had a cushion of probably, I would say maybe a month, 6 weeks of, I had some content already in there. I wasn't pressured to make content while the client engagements picked up. But when everything got at full steam again, I was doing a full workday, and then, from 6 to 7:30, 6 to 9 sometimes, that's what I was doing. I was recording YouTube videos. I was editing YouTube videos. I was doing all of the pieces of that puzzle, and often weekends as well, to try to keep up, because at that time I had committed that, this is working. I'm not going to stop something that's working just because I'm tired in this moment, because I could see it building towards something. So I committed the aggressive goal, I realize now, of 2 videos per week. And I think we've only missed 2 uploads ever since then, in the 18 months since that point. So, and both of those were planned. So like, that's okay. But yeah, I made the commitment, and it was a lot. It's definitely much easier now, but get a team if you can. That's like the lesson learned there. But putting in the time on the front end, you see those results every single month afterwards, which is what I love so much about YouTube as a platform. It's like an investment vehicle in some ways. You're investing time now to get those views, that attention. I mean, the ad revenue down the line years later.
And once that kicked in, was that more, were the 30 videos kind of done, and were you having to like produce in real time, or like what was the production kind of cycle like at that point?
It really, oh man, it really ebbed and flowed. Like there was times where I'd be 4 weeks ahead, and then it would be back to, oh my gosh, there's a video that needs to go on Wednesday and it's Sunday. It was really just, balancing the other priorities in life and trying to get out as much as I could while maintaining a consistent schedule. I was never doing the, edit and publish immediately thing. I was always ahead at least a day. Most of the time I would say 4 or 5 plus days, but not often more than that. It was really trying to just squeeze them out of those evenings and weekends, like you said.
Another thing I really like too, kind of keeping with the using what you have, because there was a period where your videos, you have a very dark background, and it looked like a stylistic choice. But you explained that you moved houses, and your house was completely gutted, and it was dark because you didn't want people to see your drywall, or other stuff, out of whatever was going on.
I literally had a ring light, which was my only piece of equipment I'd ever purchased for the channel ever, which was a $20 ring light. I had it jammed on top of the camera directly at it, so it was blinding me the entire time. And you can see if you look closely in the videos, it was just super exposed right on top, and it would make the whole background really dark just because the ring light was so close to the actual lens or the actual webcam that it would just remove everything else. And the wall behind me that you can see in some shots and some live streams is paneling, which for most of the time of filming was either ripped open and there was like studs visible. It was unfinished drywall. Like we were ceiling to floor remodeling that entire house. And I'm glad it came off as a stylistic choice. It definitely was not.
I think it was just great because it was like, okay, even if like your house is gutted and there's not a great spot to film, you're still cranking out videos and you still kept it going.
Yeah. I mean, it's the content that matters, right? It's the content that matters. I don't matter in any of it. It's the content.
Yeah. And it's people searching, or a lot of it is people, they have a problem and they're looking for a solution.
Yep.
I do want to get into we'll talk about kind of your research process in a sec, but I wanted to like keep this building with like your YouTube journey. So then you also started using a little bit more editing. You started using Adobe Rush.
Mm-hmm.
And how is that as like, I don't know, usefulness or like in that stage? How was it? How was using Adobe Rush?
I mean, I was at the point where I was maxed out on the time I had. And so I went with Adobe Rush, even though I actually knew how to use Premiere Pro. I was comfortable with Photoshop and those kinds of more advanced products. And I ended up using Adobe Rush because it was almost like editing on my phone in that it was cut, piece together. And I only used it to edit out takes where I was completely wrong or I had to cut off in the middle. Even to this day, like we've had a whole journey with editing of getting very edited and then going back to almost no editing. In those early days where we introduced editing, it was very much like, I think I timed myself at 1.12 minutes to edit a video, which I'm not at that now, unfortunately, but it was just purely an efficiency choice to pick Premiere Rush because it was just faster. My computer could handle it. And I really wasn't trying to make them look polished. And I think accidentally, that was a good choice early on.
Just to keep it simple, keep it like easy so it just doesn't become overwhelming and you make videos versus getting stuck in like the edit, which has happened to me multiple times of like the video just like it's not going out because like it keeps getting polished.
Yeah, I'm not a videography channel, right? Like I'm not a videographer. I'm not a photographer. I'm a process geek that happens to have a webcam. And I think I needed to own that. And I mean, eventually I realized I had to up the quality, which is why some of these things have gotten better over time. But I think I had to realize like what lane I was in and realize that my audience would understand that and maybe even connect with it more because it was just, some geek talking to her webcam.
I think another interesting hack or tip that you said was that you also kept your gear set up. So do you want to talk about that, of how that helped?
I mean, this early stage, like if we're in like the phase 2 of my journey, if you think about that, like the second recorder of doing it as a thing, this was the tip that changed everything. So from having the webcam set up to the microphone just sitting on the desk, already plugged in, to the ring light, wonkily put on top of the webcam, absolutely everything for filming was able to be turned on in 20 seconds. I mean, it's just opening the application. And that is something that I have stuck with even as like my gear has evolved and, the overall setup has gotten a little bit more sophisticated. One of the purchases I did later on when I started investing back in the channel was a Stream Deck. So I can do that same thing even now of one button, everything turns on. And it doesn't seem like that would matter. But when you have so many other things to do and you're trying to just focus on, like we talked about, the content, I don't want to worry about any of that. I want to just know it's there and not try to be too creative every time.
Yeah, I think it's a big thing. Like the more barriers you can remove from like, even like when your brain, like, because you're like, at least for me, my brain will just latch onto any dumb reason to like not do something. And it's like, I don't want to move the tripod.
Yeah.
But like, so like removing all those barriers of like, okay, it's set up, ready to go. What's your, what commands are on your Stream Deck? Like when you hit button, what is it doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, the one that I'm using most often is just, I have a little icon. I'm looking down at it now. It's just like a little TV icon and a light icon. And when I click on that, it turns on my lights around here, like most of them that are able to be connected through that. It opens up the camera, OBS in that case, because that's what I'm using now to record. And it closes out any other windows I have. That's the most common kind of compound key command, which again, probably saves me 3 to 5 minutes because I would have to go in and turn off all the lights and so on. And it's just there. Mm-hmm. That's probably the most common one that I use. I have a bunch of other tiny ones for like scene changes in OBS and so on. But the lighting, right. I did invest in like smarter lighting now, which wasn't, it's like $100 or $200, but that was worth it for that reason.
Are these the Elgato lights that connect with the Stream Deck? Because it's all Elgato.
Actually, half Elgato, half Philips Hue. So, but they all connect.
They all connect. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, it's like those little micro things at this point that I'm like constantly looking for. That like 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here.
Can you talk about, you mentioned that you also started doing like monthly themes.
Yeah.
So kind of tell me about that, and did that kind of help structure ideas? Did that help you like generate more ideas, or was it an experiment that, I don't know, didn't go anywhere?
Yeah. So when it came to the actual content itself, for I'm going to guess on the timeline, several months, we'll say, a quarter and a half, maybe 2 quarters. We were trying to do themes for the channel. So on 1 month, it would be like all about automations. For 1 month, it would be all about personal productivity. And I did really like this from my perspective when I was running most of the things, including the content selection, because it let me, it's that freedom from constraint idea. Like when you are in art class and you have a blank canvas, it's really overwhelming. But when you're told, draw something that reminds you of the beach, all of a sudden you've got tons of ideas. I liked the themes because it helped me focus in. But the problem with it, and actually why we've moved away from themes now, is someone comes to our channel, they discover us because they love automations. But that was our monthly theme. And then we're not going to be talking about that again until the next time automations is a theme. And that was problematic to me in terms of making our content just kind of continue to nurture our same community. So we have shifted actually from a monthly based theme to some main content pillars or buckets, whatever you want to call it. And we kind of scatter them throughout every month. So we maintain a balance over our core topics every month rather than just going all in on one SKU.
And then do those kind of get filtered or applied to like a playlist, like grouped into a playlist? So then if someone's like, I really want automations, they can just go to the automation playlist.
Yes. And a blog category, because we do repurpose these now. That was like part of the evolution. But yes. All
right, cool. And okay, so whatever, we're in phase 3-ish. I don't know. When did you start notice it? Your channel's growing. When did you start noticing that like leads were coming in through YouTube? Like I guess did it start like people were reaching out to you like because they knew you were a consultant and they're like, hey, can I hire you? Or how did that sort of start evolving, and how did business leads start coming in?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's almost like you've done these conversations before. Yes, exactly like you described. Yeah, early on, we'd have a tech tutorial about Cognito forms. Someone would watch that video, like, wow, I'm using Cognito, but I'm also struggling with my other tech. Then they'll look in the description, go to our website. And at that point, it was, I think, myself and 2 subcontractors. The team was very small, and they would become a client. I think YouTube works fantastically well for services and high touch and one-on-one things. I think people don't realize how well. I would say our first lead, I probably mentioned this in the video with the timestamp where the exact date, but if I were to guess right now, a few months, and that's it. I would say 4 months or so was our first, true lead. 3 months maybe is when we've had our first contact. And by 6 months into the journey of YouTube, almost every lead was coming from YouTube, which was wild.
What was it before? Like where would your leads come from before?
Primarily word of mouth and guesting on people's podcasts or other things like that. But I mean, we were high touch consulting service. So it was mainly referrals from past clients, and that kept like the business full. And that very much changed in 6 months, which actually turned into a problem in terms of just not having any more time.
Which seems like it's a good lead into how did your business pivot?
Yeah, kind of like YouTube. It was not a pivot. It was not intended to be a pivot. It was an experiment. So when the consulting was getting booked out, and we had a wait list, looking in months, not weeks. When it reached that point, I realized something had to give. So this was only, I would guess, 6 to 9 months into YouTube, where it was just way too much. And started a wait list for the idea of having kind of a group education of some kind. I never wanted to do courses. I just worried that my type of client, like they would see a course and they would never get into it. So I was, from the get-go, I wanted to do a membership, which is largely considered terrible advice, but it worked. We put a wait list out there for a membership to see if anyone would be interested in kind of working with me in a group way. Started mentioning it in videos and our newsletter. And that filled up so quickly that I realized, oh, there's something here. A month from that waitlist filling up, which I had a minimum number in my head, once it hit that, I created the first round of what became our membership. Early on, there was almost no members. I think we had maybe 8 people, 12 people join at the initial launch. And I mainly used that course content for my one-on-one engagements. So when someone would work with me one-on-one, they'd get this course as kind of the backbone of our one-on-one time, where they do session 1 between, or they do the modules between our sessions. And I continued iterating, and a few months into the membership being launched, kind of like YouTube, it just took off in a way that I didn't expect. And it became more clients, more demand, just a faster growth rate than any of our one-on-one services, even at a high ticket price point. That decided to lean into that, which was scary.
Yeah, but it seems like it keeps working out so far.
I mean, you're not hearing about all the things that I've tried that haven't worked, but these are the ones that have.
Yeah, I mean, so right now, currently, it's a hybrid of you're interacting with a private Slack group, but people come in and then there's sort of a module. It's an online course, so pretty much partly,
Yeah.
but then people interact on a Slack group, and if they have like questions or support, it's supported either by someone from your team or other members. Yeah, so go ahead.
No. I you're spot on. It's a course and that's kind of what it's designed to replicate that one-on-one service experience, because that's what I built the course for, to support one-on-one help, and the two kind of were meant to always go together.
I think it's an interesting model. I mean, have you found that it's seemed better? Have you found that it's worked out better than your initial reaction of not doing a straight up course? Do you think the community aspect adds something different to it that makes it more valuable than just sort of like a one-off course, like you sign up and maybe you do it, maybe you don't?
Yeah. I mean, we're continuing to explore ways to increase the accountability to get it closer to that hybrid where it started of, one-on-one plus course. Now it's at course plus membership, and we're trying to continually bring those 2 points together. I think it's, proven my hypothesis from the beginning that if you were to just have a course, things would fall off. But also, if it were to just be a course, both the price point and the actual result people get wouldn't work. I think one thing I didn't mention so far is that the topic that we're actually talking about is a particular software called ClickUp, which updates weekly. And so when it comes to creating a course about ClickUp, it's a recipe for disaster to do something that is meant to be self-guided, because ClickUp updates every week, both in public releases and in non-published releases, non-published updates that happen that you just have to notice. And so I never wanted it to be, here's a book that you can read. That's basically what I view a course as. I wanted it to always be I am in a classroom. Yes, there's a book, just like if you were in a college class, there's a textbook and you have to read the chapters. But when you have a question in a college classroom, you come to the class and you ask the question rather than spending 5 hours trying to look up something on Google. I kind of tried to build this experience around knowing that this course was going to be imperfect always. And I wanted it to be factored in that, yes, of course, you're going to ask questions. Yes, of course, there's going to be personal kind of challenges you're going to run into. And I didn't want that to ever feel like an exception or something that had to happen individually in a support inbox. Mm-hmm. So I think it helps. And I think it also kind of matches with our overall brand vibe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think actually that's a really good point that, especially making a course that revolves around software. Like software is always being updated with like something like Premiere or Resolve or Final Cut. They have more predictable like release schedules where it's like once a year there's sort of a big update and there's new features, and then all these tutorial companies like release their updates to their courses. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're right. ClickUp does release literally every week or something, a tweak or something new. And even ClickUp is the example that you use, but even with any SaaS type of software, there's like at least once a month or something new with most companies. And that's also, I guess another interesting point too, is like, because of the people, your niche is like systems for small business owners, but like every small business owner system is different. And so even though you could kind of instruct people how to use ClickUp, it's such a flexible tool that there's really no like one like right or wrong way to use it. So it would be something that is like, yeah, here's 80% of this stuff, that you could learn how to use it, but there's probably gonna be like that extra 20% that's gonna be like specific to every single person. And the community sort of solves that final 20% issue of people having like figuring out their own like specific needs.
Exactly. And I think like we're also just teaching people to acknowledge that there is a 20% there and that they can't just wish it away or outsource it away. Like that's part of the whole reframe. Like you think about if you had a video editing class, you can teach someone how to use the software, but teaching them how to develop their own editing style, like that needs to be done through interaction. It just doesn't work to just read that this is how you have a moody style. It just doesn't work. I wouldn't think. I don't know. Maybe someone's done it.
I think it's this hybrid model is really interesting and probably like a way that future course developers like would go, and kind of having this hybrid platform. Shifting back to YouTube. Yeah. Actually, no, I did want to jump in because you mentioned it, and now I like definitely want to dive in further to that. What were some of the like things that you did try that didn't work? Like, what was something that was notable that either YouTube or online course / membership related?
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, just kind of the nature of myself and then the business by extension, constantly trying little things to see what'll work and what'll not work. YouTube example I could probably point to was something that works for other channels, but I found that actually really did not work very well with our channel, which was interviews on YouTube. So, I mean, you get that probably with a podcast. Podcast isn't commonly an interview-based platform, conversations. With YouTube, I wanted to bring that out because I love listening to interview-based podcasts, and I wanted to bring on some guests on the channel. And I added this experiment on, and not that my guests were not great, they were, but the performance of interview-based videos, the retention you have on YouTube, that to me was kind of more of our failed experiment. We ended up pivoting it a little bit to make them work, and we still can incorporate interviews because of some changes we made. But that was something that we're like, this will be great process behind the scenes. And then we went to do it, and it just the views weren't there. The search algorithm did not like what we were doing.
Yeah, obviously this gets posted on YouTube, but it's more because like I do it right now because why not? But
exactly.
I'm wondering. I mean, YouTube's definitely aware of it because they just hired a like head of podcast. It's sort of like obviously not quite clear what that use is, but presumably there'll be a way in the future to possibly tag videos as like, hey, it's a podcast, because like YouTube Music is big, where people just like to play stuff in the background and use it as a music player, even though they're music videos or whatever. So presumably they might have the same kind of idea with podcasting, where if you tag the video as podcast, maybe there's some extra features that make it better suited to be a podcast player that just kind of plays in the background for people.
I mean, that would be huge.
That's the assumption. That'd be nice. I think when you posted these interviews, were you posting them as like big long videos, or did you post clips? Yeah, long videos.
Big long live videos for the most part, live at least. Just
because that's the other experiment too of like, is it the clips probably will perform better than 40-minute interviews.
That's what we've pivoted to. So just to give away the punchline, like we pivoted to clips and based around a specific search target, even though it might have been a conversation about several things, it was always focused when we started to get them to perform, it was focused around one particular element of the conversation, which you live and you learn, right?
I believe you just recently posted something on Creative SOPs, which was an excerpt from a longer interview, but I'm guessing there's keyword data around SOPs or something that like led you to believe that would perform.
Exactly. Yep. I mean, we had somebody come on who was talking about how they, redid their whole workflow. And this is very heady tour of like the entire path to process improvement, which to my geeky, membership, like we get that stuff. We like that stuff. YouTube does not. The algorithm does not. And so we took a clip out of it that talked specifically about, redefining what you have, mentioning the words of Trello to ClickUp, which is something that, has a lot of traffic. And we just tried to optimize a segment of it for something bite-sized that would actually solve a problem. That's a mistake we've made in the past as well of clipping, but clipping so small that it was just literally a clip. And instead, now we're realizing that the clips really need to be self-contained value nuggets. It can't be a value and not really finish. It needs to be the full value nugget of itself in our clips.
So when you're saying clipping, like you released like too short of an excerpt that it wasn't useful?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Too short of
Did you find a sweet spot like of actual runtime?
It tends to be around 15 minutes. I mean, when we're doing long interviews, I don't like to clip the conversation too much. Like 8-minute clips tend to just feel awkward when the pacing is that of a normal conversation. 15. And our YouTube videos tend to be on the longer side. We've experimented with shorter, but our audience seems to be okay with, 15 to 20 minute videos even. So 15 seems to be a sweet spot for clipping from long, like hour-long interviews down to a really good nugget or portion of the journey.
That has like a setup and it's like, this is what you're going to get. And then like, it does have that payoff.
Yes.
In that conversation. Cool.
Yeah, because interviews have like their own pace to them. So I feel like when you take a 5-minute clip or so, it tends to almost, it just feels weird to hear such a slow, steady conversation. It's such a short clip. I don't know what it is about those two things that kind of seem to conflict, but I'm sure people do it well, but we haven't figured it out.
Got it. And so, okay, so we're today a YouTube channel. What does the process look like today in, let's start with ideas. I know I'll link to it. You have a good video on sort of your YouTube workflow. But let's start. So like originating the ideas, how are you sourcing your ideas today for, what video to create next?
So the majority of our video ideas come from either our members or our audience already. So they literally tell us, best advice I could give is just to listen. So we make a proactive effort. Every single person in the company has the ability to add ideas onto our ideas list. Anytime a client tells us, I'd like to see a video on this, and we say, hey, we'll add it to the list, we are actually adding it to an actual list, or looking if it's already there. That is how we're collecting ideas for most of them, is just a concept someone asked for. And when we have a lot of people ask for the same thing, okay, that's a hot topic. Alternatively, there are times where we will look based on keywords. So we'll see a lot of search traffic for a term that's related to our business. We're not showing up very high on that search result on Google. So we'll try to make a YouTube video around that search result to try to increase our Google ranking. I will say for the most part, our content is based around human questions and the keyword comes after, which is backwards to how most people do it. But because we're in such a niche and we kind of really own our little corner of that niche, it seems to always be easy to find the keyword after we find the right question. But maybe that's just because of where we're at. We're not competing for like general marketing keywords. We start with a human question. We usually find the keyword after that and develop from there.
So like someone has a question on how to use ClickUp, how do I make a new list or a list view? And then you look at the keyword data to then figure out the best way to like title the video with that keyword. Is that how you use it?
Yeah, not just title, but also, descriptions and the actual words I'll use in the video. So, answer the public and different things. I want to figure out how people are asking that question. I often will search Facebook groups. So if it is folders, they want to figure out how to use folders. I'll search folders in some popular ClickUp Facebook groups in that case and figure out exactly how people are phrasing that question. Include that exact phrasing in my verbal, like how I speak. So I'm speaking in their own language, and also in the video description, I want to phrase it as they would write it. Of course, backed up by search data, not just Facebook searches, but those two tend to overlap more often than not in this tutorial space.
That's a great tip. What you mentioned answer the public. What other tools are you using for keyword research?
So, for a while we were doing the standard vidIQ, TubeBuddy stuff. Honestly, less valuable now. Mainly when we're looking at keywords now, we're looking at our own analytics. So our Google Analytics for our website and our YouTube Analytics to what's actually driving us traffic already. I would say our blogging keywords are really our main keyword research tools. So we'll find keywords from where we're getting site traffic and try to develop more videos around those topics. I used to really live and breathe by TubeBuddy and vidIQ and similar tools for YouTube, but I found out that the search results that they were giving me were inconsistent. And especially when you're in a niche, it's always too little data. It's all right, fine. I'll just see what happens.
My favorite is when vidIQ, you run the same search for the same keyword, and vidIQ is yes, it's great, go for it. And then TubeBuddy's it is a terrible keyword. No, you'll never rank. Who do I believe?
Yeah, it's not good for niches.
YouTube's tough to get data. When you're running on your the keyword data for your actual website, is that through just Google Search Console, or are you using Ahrefs or a third-party tool?
Just Google Search Console at this point. Yeah, and I will say on YouTube, one thing that I have realized now since we stopped using TubeBuddy and vidIQ is we just use our own data. So looking at our own keyword analytics there, I feel like that has been actually pretty reliable, because it's amazing how many times we'll find a keyword that's performing really well and we have no videos about that. They're just somehow we mentioned that word in one video, so we're showing up for that one. Same goes for the blog. We're actually looking at our existing traffic and conversations and logic from a human perspective, which maybe eventually will stop working, but so far it's working pretty well.
So like if you notice a content gap where it's like, oh, we're kind of ranking for this keyword, but we don't actually have a video dedicated to that, then like that's a good candidate for a video.
Personal use was like a specific keyword. So ClickUp for personal use was an angle. I had mentioned it in one video talking about my own day. And we started noticing that, that keyword was getting a lot of people to watch this video, which was about something unrelated. It was about like chores or something. And yet it was bringing us traffic for this particular keyword. And so then we ended up developing a whole video around that keyword, which also lined up with a lot of requests we were having. So you know how it goes.
Well, now once you're actually making the videos, can you tell me about your evolution of your scripting process? I believe you started from like no outline to an outline to a detailed outline, or what is it now and what was the evolution of that?
So right now it is, it's an outline. I mean, no scripting. I've never done a full script for any video except for some like brand deal stuff, which we just dabbled into, where I've done some scripting, but even then I'm terrible with sticking to it. So our process right now is we have kind of main sections in our template. So every time I have a video, the template pulls in and it has, hook, explanation, that kind of thing. And I really treat it like bullet points. So if it was a video about the top tips, I would write each of the 5 tips and maybe an indent saying, don't forget to mention that there's this common issue. That's it. The rest of it is ad lib. And previously, if you want to say where it started by literally me sitting down and saying, oh, I should talk about how to create a task, record. That was the original scripting. It has since evolved into kind of that line. I will say if there's any people's comments I want to call out or specific things I want to quote, I will write that in. So for example, if I see a question in Facebook that's exactly worded one way, I will write that to make sure I say it that exact way. But otherwise, it's like an outline you would do for a school essay. And it takes, 20 minutes. It doesn't take terribly long to come up with the outline unless I'm doing something particularly creative.
Did you have a background in speaking or presenting? Because you going off an outline, you always you're very clear. You speak in complete. Unlike me, you speak in complete sentences, and it's just it just comes off very naturally, very friendly to camera. So yeah, I was wondering if that was a skill you had before, if that was just something that sort of came naturally. Yeah.
Nope. I just knew I wasn't a very eloquent writer. I can write, but grammar's not my forte at all. And I guess just since I was younger, I grew up in a house where rather than writing or being, particularly academic, my lifestyle growing up was very much story-based. I've been trying to analyze this myself to figure out why is this the case, because I'm an introvert. I don't talk that much to real humans. No, it's a skill I had. I knew I had it. I knew presentations were always easy for me. And that's part of what made YouTube a natural fit. I wanted something that was as low friction as possible. So no editing, talking to a webcam. Got it.
Yeah, you do not use a lot of filler words, so that also makes your editing a lot easier, I imagine.
But I also leave them in when I do use them. I think I think that whole influencer culture of you need to be perfect and you can't have your breaths in and you can't use the word we're just people. So when I do say or mess up, I like to keep it in whenever I can, unless it's a falsehood of some kind, because it's just how I would talk. And whenever I've had an editor come in and help us, one of the things that made us reduce that editing contract was it was just too edited. The gasps and the likes were edited out, and it's this just doesn't sound human anymore.
Interesting. I did want to ask, because you mentioned, you did try out bringing on an outside editor, because right now you have edited all your videos, right? Mm-hmm. So what happened? So this didn't work out with bringing on an editor. What happened?
So we brought someone in fan of the channel, which was like such a great plus. They knew our content. I actually did test projects with 3 different editors, found one. I was like, you're the best one of these. Came on, and just over time, I think the quality just slipped. And I also think in hindsight, like I didn't have enough of a voice yet, like to know what the voice of the channel was. I couldn't put into words the fact that I wanted it to sound like I was just having a conversation with you. I didn't have good inspiration channels to say, hey, I want to sound like that guy or that gal. And so the editor had a lot of free reign to kind of develop a tone, and the way it was going, it ended up developing that person's tone. But it just felt so far from the initial heart and really what the business was, because it was outsourced. It wasn't like it was an employee who got to know us and who we are. And I think could be so much better. And we're going to be looking to, redo this, try it again this year. And I think just knowing who we are and what that tone is going to make it so much easier. And I didn't know what I didn't know. So talk about another failed experiment. There you go. That didn't work out.
Yeah, so it seems like a matter of kind of going too soon before you could be like, I want it like this, not like this. And so they had too much leeway for, I mean, not saying...
Leeway's good to a point.
Yeah, not that you want it to be like formulaic, but it was, I guess, early stages where you didn't have your own voice or you didn't have your own style cemented, where you could be like, I guess sometimes too, it's like you like see something and you're like, I can't pinpoint like what's wrong with it, but I just know it's not.
That's exactly it.
Or do you feel like you're better at the point now where like if you did see something wrong, you'd be like, or something that isn't like your style, you could be like, not that, more like this? Is that sort of the stage you're at now where it's like, hey, we got another editor, like we could better communicate like what works, what doesn't work?
I would say we're not quite there yet, but we're almost there. And that's like our prerequisite for outsourcing it again. But it's the same as writing. Like it took, 3 years to figure out like what we want to sound like. And we're still figuring that out. And video, there's so many more elements that you have to coordinate to make it feel right. Yes, what you've said, like that understanding who you are as a video brand was far more complicated than I thought when we really wanted to be intentional about it. And it was more than just, me clicking record.
beyond Loom.
Yeah. Upgrade. Don't do that, guys. If you're watching this, don't do Loom. Just skip that stage.
I did want to ask, because you have some really like very specific style things in your video. Not stuff. Well, yeah, they are style things. In the sense of maintaining watch time and getting people to subscribe. Like you'll just point blank tell people, hey, if you're watching the video this far, why not click subscribe? Or in another one, you had 12 hidden tips for ClickUp features, and I think in the intro you're like, stay tuned for sorry, it's like a tongue
That's what I said, exactly like that.
Stay tuned for trick 11.
Tip?
No, tip 11. Anyways, you were teasing the tip for people to stick around. How important is watch time as a metric for you? And have you found that really structuring your videos and like including things like that in the script, has that helped?
I think it's something that we're still figuring out. I don't know the right balance for it. Like you mentioned, like we've done the call outs, like almost the commercial cuts of like, subscribe if you're still watching, because obviously you like this stuff. Like having those kinds of clips, it's fun and it's really easy to add in. The teasers at the beginning of like stay till the end, I'd say that's one of my earliest experiments with trying to increase that watch time. It probably felt the least genuine to me, which is why you won't see that very often in newer channels, because it almost feels too common. And I think as soon as you have a call out to subscribe or a call out to keep watching that feels like every other channel, what I'm realizing now at least, it stops working. So I've, experimenting here, I don't think I have a great answer in terms of whether it really improves watch time. The biggest thing that helps is honestly just listicles. That's our number one thing. Like if we want to get a video with really high watch time, 10 things, 2 things, 5 things, 4 with clear timestamps. I mean, that will always perform really well for us. The teasers, I haven't noticed a meaningful change. Our channel is also really weird though, compared to YouTube norms. People like hang out, like they like watch. Our watch times are higher than they should be. And people are watching longer videos than they should because of just the type of person we have, the type of geek, as we say, who we have watching our channel.
Yeah, I feel like your channel is also one of those things where like if you're a new ClickUp user and then you find your channel, you're kind of going to binge. I mean, I definitely binged it where it was like, oh, cool. Like all these things like, yes. Okay. Interesting workflow, interesting ideas. And, yeah, it definitely feels like it's the type of person that finds one of your videos. It's just like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
Go down the rabbit hole.
If you are a weird little person, like the rabbit hole is built for you. So we don't have to do as much work as an entertainment channel or someone who just does random tutorials. Like we tend to have a pretty concise and almost from the beginning, very small niche that we stick to, which makes it pretty easy to have people binge and really get something out of each video.
Mm-hmm. I did want to talk about we talked about early gear. What is your current gear setup?
Oh, okay. I'll look around the room.
Yeah. Disco lights.
Yeah, disco lights. So those have stuck with us. This is a $10 as seen on TV disco light that's made for Christmas, like holiday time, that we keep around. Philips Hue bulbs I've already mentioned, which are not really active right now. Our main key light is an Elgato flat key light because when I first purchased it, I needed something very small. That's actually going to be upgraded with a deflector soon, so it'll be a little bit softer. But that's the main light that you see here. For the longest time, the only light that we had was a ring light, as I talked about, which was $20. So if you're stressed about light, just use a window like I did. It'll be fine. In terms of camera, we have a Sony a6400 with a Sigma 14 millimeter. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. The iconic Sigma lens for the blurry background, which I could probably look at what it exactly is. Obviously, I don't touch this gear too much other than the initial setup. Stream Deck for shorthands. Microphone is a Shure SM7B with a cloud lifter, Scarlett 2 interface. So if I wanted to have a guest, I could. And right now, I'm actually just using a webcam. So a 1080p, just Logitech webcam for live streams, just to avoid any complications of audio syncing, which even when I try to use a virtual cam, sometimes it just fights with things. So the power of simplicity here, I'm willing to give up the aesthetics of my nice camera. So that way, when I do live streams, I still usually stick to just a standard webcam. Did I hit on everything?
I think you did. Oh, and now you are editing in Premiere, right?
Yeah. So yeah, Premiere now for editing, what editing that there is with a template. So.
And you're using OBS for screen recording?
Actually, I should probably highlight that in detail. Like the OBS is used to record the screen in lieu of Loom, but how I actually record now, which I would only recommend if you have your stuff pretty much stay the same every time, is using scenes connected to the Stream Deck. So I'm actually live editing as I record. So, the screen popping up to the side and then going full screen, then going full face. I have that kind of live DJing using a Stream Deck and OBS, which is so simple, but also saves me a lot of time on editing.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit more. So you're basically, it's basically like, so you kind of have your thing set up like you were doing a live stream with multiple layouts, but you're just recording it to tape. Well, so that is like a older broadcast face. You're recording it to disc.
Yes.
They still call it tape. Okay, you're recording. So you're just recording. So you're not recording to your camera. You're recording into your computer through OBS.
Yeah, using Yep.
Okay, and then you have a couple layouts of like my screen, your camera, your screen and camera.
Yeah, I'm so lazy. I went as far as to, if you ever hear of StreamYard, like the streaming platform? Yeah, so they have some pre-made layouts. I literally took a screenshot of their icons, put them on my Stream Deck, and then put my layouts to be almost exactly like theirs. So that way it would be completely consistent whether I was live streaming or on OBS, like the layouts. And I could remember like finger one is this, finger two. Yeah, it's reached that point. So I live record.
That is great. And then you just bring it into Premiere and just kind of trim it down?
Yeah, I usually end up with like a take around 30 minutes and it gets down to about 15, sometimes even 10. So that lets you know how many times I retry a section. Because that's the downside of ad-libbing is I'll try to say the same segment a few different times before I find a time I really, really like. So that's mainly where the editing is, not small things, but like here's a 2-minute section that was just a bad attempt at section 2, and I'll just delete that all out.
Got it. I think that's a great tip for making like screen recording and editing a lot quicker. OBS with the Stream Deck and your setup.
It only works though if you don't need to correct things, really. If you don't do too many corrections afterwards. If you're a real editor, you might not like that.
Yeah, you are limited, because then if you're like, oh, I'm showing my computer screen, but I really want to see my camera, that's not an option.
Correct.
Yeah. Great. Okay.
Yeah.
So you just got to be careful. Do it. Proceed with warning.
Exactly.
Well, so now you mentioned live streaming, and now you've done a couple, or you've done some live streams. Can you kind of talk about how you've been using live streaming?
Yeah, so early on, I was attempting to use live streams for casual conversations, interviews, podcast-esque. Like I said, that didn't perform long term. It was like a blip, and then it died off. And fast forward a bit, I've looked to using live streams at this point as almost like a podcast, in the sense of just diving deeper with my existing audience and not trying to optimize them for search at all. So with few exceptions, the only live streams we'll be doing on the channel are things like Q&A for the audience, or I started a new series with my own like personal quarterly reflections, kind of behind the scenes in my business, those kinds of things that I don't care if they never get picked up by search. They're there for my people who want to like get to know us better and go further down that kind of world with us. That's kind of how we're using live streams right now.
Yeah. So those are, you call them lookbacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
It feels like a quarterly update for a company. Is it sort of like a build in public kind of, because you share your numbers, you share like subscriber data and I think some revenue data. So yeah, what was the thought behind that, of making that, of like kind of broadcasting that and making that public?
Yeah, so I think that comes back to figuring out like who we are. One of the things I realized that like is core to what I want this business to be is, imperfect. We talk a lot about process, but I never wanted this to develop into that influencer status, which I mean, we're nowhere close to that, but that idea that we are the perfect business and you want to become like us. Instead, I wanted it to be more like we are actively trying to work on this. Here's what we're trying. What are you trying? It is that build in public idea. And so the idea of just having YouTube videos talking about here's the right way to do this, or here's the way to build this, to me, that felt very incomplete because no one was hearing what wasn't working. No one was hearing, who the heck we are. And I wanted to give that imperfect context for those who care enough to hear it. And some ways I've seen this done is through like monthly income reports, which have a good intent, but to me, the numbers of revenue kind of throw off everything else and can cause more harm than good. So the idea of the look back was to give people that behind the scenes, the mess, basically let them see the mess so that they know they're not the only messy ones, and kind of let them know that how we're developing. Because I don't think ProcessDriven isn't this brand saying, I've launched 4 successful multi-million-dollar companies, so you should become just like me. ProcessDriven is about, we are driven by process. Here's what's working. And it's this conversation with our audience.
Yeah, I think that's great. And your other, you do a live recap of ClickUp's annual virtual event or conference, whatever. Yeah.
Whatever they call it.
That's coming up soon. You said you did one last year, and that helped establish you as like ClickUp, going beyond like ClickUp tutorial person to like ClickUp thought leader, thought innovator. How did doing that live stream also help kind of reach a new audience or like reach other people? Yeah.
So ClickUp had this conference. It was a big event for the software. And again, I feel like a broken record. I basically just wanted to do something. I wanted to do something to fill in my audience about it. And I was like, I think it was just a week or two beforehand. I was like, let's put a live stream on. And right after the day, I'll just recap. And it accidentally turned into more than just a recap and turned into that opinions piece that you're talking about. I think it helped the channel because it did give us a perspective, which you do not get in a tutorial. You do not have time in an 8-minute tutorial to give too many points of view. But what I thought was really important is that the channel, like going back to process-driven being what it is, the channel is a place for discussion and for, continually getting better. And if the channel became a tutorial hub, then why are we different than a ClickUp help doc? I didn't want to just read off ClickUp help docs. That's not very valuable. My perspective was people came to our channel because they wanted to figure out like the reality of using this tool. And if we're just saying everything's great, nothing's wrong, this is perfect, that's what ClickUp's doing. That's what their marketing department is in charge of. There's not room for more of that, or there doesn't need to be more of that. So that video got a lot of backlash, both positive and negative, from our audience and from other groups of people. I don't regret it at all, but it was definitely far more divisive than I thought it would be initially. I don't know if that answers your question, though.
That part kind of does, because also like YouTube loves controversial videos. So that also might explain why it got more traction, because YouTube's kind of, algorithm's kind of crazy and likes to promote that stuff. Yeah, no, I mean, I guess my question was generally just like, how are you using live streaming? And the two parts of like, one directly for your community, and then another part sharing your thoughts in a way that's outside of like what ClickUp's putting out, and you can offer your own perspective, which I think is important. Okay, so winding down, you've published the videos. What are you doing promotion-wise, and then also like repurposing the content?
So this was the first area where I really started getting help when it came to YouTube, was in this step, because I really realized the value in being able to, squeeze as much as I could out of a primary piece of content like a video. Right now, what we do primarily is to create a blog post that's optimized for search for Google. We rewrite it all. We used to just do transcripts and the video, and that was it. We've evolved that over time to be a full, written for a blog, my goodness, a full written blog post. And that was kind of the main repurposing step. We then extended that to also be an email newsletter for only our best videos. We didn't want to send out an email for every video. And then also social media posts. So we have kind of a repurposing flow that every video goes through. There's like a light and then a heavy, depending on the video and how much we want to push it. And most importantly, like that blog becomes another, that SEO game is very similar to YouTube in that it grows over time. And social media, because it's so brief, we have our social media meant to repeat for any videos that are evergreen. So that way they do also recycle. That's our main repurposing. We're working right now on incorporating video clips and chopping up using a software to avoid having to use a video editor for that, but doing chopped clips for social media as well. But that's it. We're not doing much with anything complex.
Have you started sharing the clips yet, or is that coming?
That's a coming. I talked about that
soon.
45 minutes ago with our marketing gal. And it's happening, but we don't have anything public yet. But that's kind of our next level, is giving those video clips for social media to avoid having to create, more something unique. Just use a clip of what we already have.
What is the thought behind like how you're going to select because is this going to be like a section from like a minute long section from a bigger video?
Yeah. And just like we talked about with the interview clipping, we're only going to be doing this for certain videos. At least that's currently the plan. And particularly listicles. Those will be our top choice of like, here's tip 1, here's tip 2, go here for the next 3. For all of these sources, we're driving traffic to our blog, actually, which has the YouTube video embedded, because we want to get that site-based traffic versus early on, we used to direct everyone to YouTube. But that's kind of that's the plan, at least.
Right. So right now in all the social media posts that are promoting the video, they're actually promoting the link to your blog post that has the video and the optimized article and all that stuff.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And how has the team developed as far, like, I know you're still recording, you're editing the videos, but who else is involved in, what's your content team look like that has their hands involved in the video in some way or after the fact?
On the YouTube side of things, I think there are 3 people currently that are involved besides myself. I will just be transparent and say like we are understaffed for what we're doing, which is funny considering, you used to do it all yourself. But we have one person who's just in charge of like content calendar, like keeping everything together, getting the videos out, stressing about it at the end of the week. That's someone else's job now. So that's our content lead. Then we have a writer who focuses primarily on the blog writing, so those SEO optimized posts. as well as the newsletters, which kind of go together in that kind of informative and helpy tone. And then we have a third person who's coming on, we're kind of stealing her from another part of the business who's going to be helping for a little bit to help create some social media content. And that person's just in charge of that edge of repurposing, which is a little bit less content helpy in tone, a little bit more, I would say, sales or call to action driven. So 2 writers, 1 manager, myself creating content. And that's pretty much who we have now. But no one's full-time on content at this point, which is the goal for 2022.
To have a full-time content. When you say content, are you talking about all, like, not just video, but your blog and all of the social media content?
Yes. Our hope is, like, I try to keep it all together, which may not be the best approach, but for us, we're trying to keep it all kind of unified. So we're having one person manage all of those pieces to keep it cohesive. And we're hoping to bring that role full-time, expand the part-time hours of the other individuals. And like, this is a big area where we're going to have some additional outsourcing in 2022, because it is, as you know, a lot of work. It is a lot of work. And, you know, the decision to outsource or go in-house is a hard one, but whichever way you go, you have to really go to really get the rewards and the sanity and time and energy back.
It's a lot of moving pieces.
Just a few.
And yeah, last one. You mentioned if you did do all of this over again, that you would batch and do things pretty similarly. But if you did do this all, if someone else was starting a channel, or if you were doing this all over again, what advice would you have to someone starting out in YouTube? A brand or company starting out in YouTube?
I think, oh my gosh, just one.
I get multiple tips.
Just multiple things that have gone wrong more than tips. I would say probably make sure that YouTube is the platform for you, which sounds so obvious, but you know, I tried to start a blog pre-YouTube and it was such a drain. It was exhausting. And not to lie, there are times where YouTube now is exhausting. It's a lot, but it's a platform I enjoy to spend time on. I enjoy spending time on. My audience enjoys spending time on this platform. It just makes sense. And I feel like so often when I talk to others, you know, members will come up and be like, I want to start a YouTube channel like yours. And then we'll talk a little bit and they don't like speaking, or they don't like being alone in a room for 6 hours on end. I love this. I'm an introvert. I don't want to talk to anybody unless it's through a camera. I mean, except for you, Joey. But I would just make sure that YouTube is where you want to be. It's a long game. It's like farming, and you have to enjoy farming to farm. It's not a quick return. It's a labor of love in some ways. I don't know if that's the right answer, but that would be the biggest thing I would keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip of like, I mean, it's funny you mentioned, you know, like, hey, do you want to start a YouTube channel, but you don't like being in front of camera, then it's probably not the best platform for you.
Yeah. It's so terrible to say, but like when people ask me like, how do you get over that? I'm like, I just wasn't afraid. I'm alone in a dark room. Like, I'm not afraid of anything right now.
Talking to a piece of glass and you're like, hello, glass.
Hello, glass. How are you?
Yeah, I mean, I think even also it's, to lean into whatever you're kind of most comfortable with or where your strengths are. Because even, I mean, YouTube, it has a lot more structure and the videos are longer, but so many short form video platforms have popped up too, where it's like you can just take you could take smaller bets on TikTok or Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, and experiment there if video's right for you.
Such a smart idea. Yeah.
And then double down into like longer YouTube videos if you're like, oh, that's working. Maybe I'll make more stuff. Or if you don't want to be on camera, be a content writer.
Exactly, right? Or do a no face shown video. Like, yeah. I think we try to emulate other people, whether it's their process or their channel or whatever, but they're doing that because that works to their strengths. I don't script, not because it's better, but because it's a strength I have, and I'm just going to lean into that to avoid having to spend time scripting. I don't think what works for someone else is going to necessarily work for you. You have to really know yourself and your team, your company's strengths.
Okay, last one, because you talk about process structure, do you have any process tips for making videos? Things that you found that worked really well in your process setup? Okay.
Number one, which we already talked about, is collecting ideas on the go. I see a lot of people who have to have brainstorm sessions to come up with ideas. I've been there. It's a terrible place to be. That central repository that everyone can add into. I mean, we have like 300 ideas in ours right now that other people are keeping up on and adding notes in. That is a huge help for when you're stuck. That's a process perspective of just making that an open space. Even letting your audience contribute to that can be huge. The second process thing that maybe this is just me is using dependencies, which is, kind of geeky. I'll put that on there, but, making it clear what really needs to wait on something else. I see so often people outline a video workflow and they're like, here's all the tasks I have to do, but you can really only do these 2 right now. Include that, bake that into your process so you can only focus on what can actually be done now and you're not distracted by those repurposing steps before you actually create the video. Video can be very overwhelming, that process, if you see everything all the time.
Yeah, I think that's a great, that is a very specific ClickUp tip.
It's a very specific, but it applies to other ones as well.
Yeah, sometimes I've gone a little overboard drawing lines to connect dependencies. Yeah, all right, well, thank you for that very specific tip. I hope a tiny portion of people understand that part.
One general, one specific. We got something for everybody.
There you go. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Layla. Where can people learn more about you and your channel and ProcessDriven?
You can head to ProcessDriven.co. That's our website, and ProcessDriven.co/YouTube to go to the YouTube channel. Hey, there's another YouTube tip. It's a redirect link that takes you right to the subscribe button. So
that is a good yes.
There's our third everybody tip to make up for the dependency one.
There you go. That's the sandwich technique. We got 2 general with a very specific one. There you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Layla.
Yeah, thank you, Joey.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you made it to this point, I'm going to assume that you liked the episode, so please leave a 5-star review or comment in your podcast app of choice. That is the best way to help this podcast grow. You can find all the show notes and additional videos over at behindtheupload.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode.